Hey everybody, it's been a super busy week in DC here, and I'm gonna head home for the weekend and for Thanksgiving and everything. I hope that if I don't talk to y'all before that you have a happy Thanksgiving. But I wanted to give you an update on that big ICE raid last weekend actually, the early morning of Sunday morning in San Antonio. So remember, this is a big raid at about 3 in the morning. There's this food court with food trucks at San Pedro and Bassi. And there's a huge law enforcement operation. They go in there and they pick up, at first, Greg Abbott said 200 people, and then we heard 150 and then 140. And they round everybody up. It's basically a dragnet. They just go get everybody. In fact, they picked up, we know from great reporting, there's been great reporting by the San Antonio press, both newspaper and television. They picked up a couple apparently that had a baby. So a couple with a young baby that was with them is rounded up, according to eyewitnesses. I think they told that to News 4. I have not heard, I don't know if you've heard what's happened to that baby and those parents. They also picked up 2 teenagers, a 15 and a 16-year-old. So 2 minors who have been in the United States, in San Antonio apparently, since they were infants. And this operation snagged them as well. And so throughout the week, my staff and I, we were sending out letters and making phone calls to the different law enforcement groups that were apparently on the scene. And so we reach out to ICE, we reach out to the FBI, to the Department of Justice, and we kept getting the runaround. We called SAPD, the Sheriff's Office, and the federal agencies in particular kept pointing the finger at one another and saying, no, we don't have much information, go talk to them. And we don't know what happened, go talk to them. And so when you have an operation like this and they're going to go after drugs or contraband or some illegal activity, they're supposed to go get a warrant. So I kept thinking, well, if it's a federal operation, then they'll go get a federal warrant from a federal magistrate. So I started looking for a federal warrant. Well, lo and behold, there is no federal warrant. The lead agency responsible for this is the Department of Public Safety and Greg Abbott. So Greg Abbott said after the raid that there's more of this to come, which means there's more of picking up kids and minors and taking them away, not telling their family where they're going or where they are, picking up apparently a baby with the parents, holding them indefinitely, not telling anybody where they are or where they're going. That seems to be what he's promising more of. And so it turns out that there's a task force, which we've known about this, it's not new, but it's called the Homeland Security Task Force, or HSTF. And it's a combination of state and federal agencies. And here it was a DPS officer that actually, when you get one of these warrants, you have to apply to the court. In this case, a state district judge signed the warrant. So you sign an affidavit, basically an affidavit by the law enforcement officer, in this case a DPS officer, saying, this is why we believe that we have probable cause to go to this particular place, to look for this particular thing or things, this particular person. And so there's an affidavit to that effect that was signed by a state district court judge in San Antonio. And this is a matter of public record, and so I'll put it up on my link in my bio so that everybody can read through it and see it. But it's a very broad search warrant. I thought the judge signed a very broad search warrant. And it talks about the fact that they had been surveilling this place for some time, I think maybe on 3 separate occasions, had gone and actually purchased drugs from somebody. It names a particular person who sold them drugs. And of course, in their warrant, they're basically asking permission to go after that guy. But what they end up doing is much bigger than that. They end up going over there and picking up everybody, basically rounding up everybody. And including, like I mentioned, according to an eyewitness, a baby, and we know at least 2 children, or 2 minors. And they've only charged, they said that there were guns, that there were contraband, that there were drugs. The only 2 charges that have come out of this whole raid is 2 people charged with illegal re-entry, which is you've come into the country illegally once and now you've done it again. So re-entry. Other than that, and again, I do doing this thing in the middle of the day, so I haven't had a chance to see all of the news that's come out today. But I haven't seen yet that anybody else has been charged with, those drugs, the guns, anything else. I certainly haven't seen that 140 people have been charged with all of those things, or that a 15-year-old, or that a 10-month-old baby, or an 18-month-old child has been charged with any of those things. And so that's the situation that we're dealing with now, is trying to get to the bottom of. That's why Greg Casar and I, the congressman, that part of San Pedro and Bassi is near where both of our districts come together. And so we work together to submit questions to the different agencies that were involved. But they've been very secretive. The Trump administration and Greg Abbott, who is working hand in hand on violating people's rights. Imagine, for example, if you were at your workplace, let's just say you work at Taco Cabana or somewhere else, and the law enforcement has reason to believe that there's somebody that you work with that is selling drugs. And they come in there and they raid your workplace, they raid Taco Cabana, I'm just using that as an example, and there's 25 employees there, 20 employees, and they pick up everybody. They just do a complete dragnet. And they don't charge you with anything for days or a week or whatever it is. Your family doesn't know what's going on. You don't necessarily have any relation to the particular person who is selling drugs. That's the situation that we're dealing with here. Is that they're saying, well, these guys, we think, or we were targeting. And remember, language matters a lot here. If you notice in both the government's press release and in the reporting, it says that they were targeting Tren de Aragua, which is a Venezuelan gang. And look, they know, and I agree with them, if there are violent, dangerous people on the street who are committing crimes, then yes, they should be charged with those crimes. The guy that was selling drugs, he should be charged with that crime. But they're using the tag of Tren de Aragua, because they know that people get very fearful and people want something done about those folks. But they use that label to label every single person in that place as a violent gang member. Even a baby that's just there with their parents. 15-year-old, 16-year-old, their family says that they had gone. Remember, there's a taco truck. It's a taco truck. So people are going to buy food. And yeah, in a second, I'll read some of the questions that y'all had from my original Facebook post. But yeah, there were a lot of people that were, it's on San Pedro Avenue. So they see a bunch of food trucks that are selling food. And, as it says in the affidavit, I believe, you could see the food trucks from San Pedro. So you can imagine that there's people stopping, going to these food trucks. But the way the government paints it, every single person there is a violent member of Tren de Aragua. They then came back and said that they suspected 27 of those people. So we've gone down from Greg Abbott's 200 to 150 to 140. Now they're saying 27 people we think were Tren de Aragua. They don't say why they believe that. They don't say that they've found emails linking them back to gang members in Venezuela, communications. They just say, we suspect these people are Tren de Aragua. The reason that we need to be skeptical of that, particularly right now, is because ICE has lied consistently. In fact, in Chicago, a federal judge recently said how appalled they were about the bald-faced lies that ICE has told. And this is ICE in Donald Trump's America in 2025. So remember, they did that operation with the Black Hawk helicopter where they came down onto that apartment building. They zip-tied people. They took people out in their underwear. They claimed that these people that they were targeting suspected Tren de Aragua people. And what came out of that? For all of that, for dragging people out in the middle of the night. U.S. citizens. What came out of that? Nobody got charged. Nobody was charged in that raid. They didn't verify or confirm that there was a single person who was Tren de Aragua. So we have to be skeptical of what they're saying and what's going on here. So let me read you all, I put up this first video, I think earlier in the week, and I got some comments back. And a lot of people saying, yes, please keep us updated, let us know what's going on. And that's what my staff worked really hard on this and many other issues. You can see all the other issues that we posted about, obviously, during the week that we've been working on. Y'all know if you follow the news that it's been a very busy week in Washington. But this happened in our backyard. This happened right in my district. And so I wanted to make sure to give y'all an update. And we don't want to see what happened in Chicago, in Charlotte, in LA, where they're going and violating the rights of U.S. citizens, where they're going up to people that have brown skin, that look Hispanic or Latino, and they're saying, well, prove to me that you're a citizen. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're going up to people and demanding that they prove that they're a citizen. But some people disagreed, right? Some people, you go on Facebook, you got a lot of different opinions from people. So, for example, somebody said, because I think it was like at 3 a.m, they said, well, it's 3 a.m., you're up to no good. I mean, look, yes, 3 a.m. is late. They were over there, but, people were eating food. They said, again, obviously they had a warrant to go after this guy that was selling drugs. I hope they got him. I'm glad they got him. But it's very likely that there were a lot of people there. And the fact that they haven't charged anybody else except 2 people with illegal reentry suggests that there were a lot of people there that even though it's the early morning hours, they weren't doing anything illegal. So watch that number. They picked up 140 people. Let's see if they charge 140 people with crimes or whether they're just detaining them and holding them. And if they're saying that these people are all undocumented, if they say, well, they weren't gang dealers, or they weren't gang members, or they weren't drug dealers, but they're all undocumented, well, tell us who these people are. Give us more information about what's going on. ICE and DHS, they've gotten to the point where they don't even want to answer questions from members of Congress. Remember, when I'm asking these questions, I'm not just asking them out of curiosity. I'm asking them because San Antonians are asking me to ask them. I'm asking them because I represent about 800,000 people in my hometown where I was born and raised, in our hometown of San Antonio. And so, yeah, it's 3 a.m. You're right. It's the early morning hours. By the way, every day in San Antonio and everywhere else across the country, people are getting out of clubs and bars and restaurants and everything else at 2 a.m. And often going to places to go get something to eat. Right? I'm sure many folks have done that over the years. There's other people that say that it was an underground nightclub. They make the case that, hey, well, it's an underground nightclub. Okay, well, if they didn't have a permit, that's charge them for not having a permit. If they were selling liquor when they didn't have a permit, whatever, there's a charge for that. But that doesn't justify you like roping everybody in and doing a dragnet and throwing them all in jail and then figuring everything else out later. In fact, my staff identified on social media one of the, I don't know, I say taco trucks. I don't know what they were selling, right? One of the food trucks. They had a security camera. So, they had a security camera that I think it looked like was basically a live stream, it looks like, right? And in DC, I've been to one time where they had like a live stream going. I guess it's to attract more customers. And in this live stream, they caught the raid. So you can see that raid happening. And there is somebody in that live stream, during that live stream when these agents are raiding the place, who says, I'm an American. Like they're saying, I'm an American. Well, what happened to that person? We don't know what happened to that person either. They told us they picked up, I'm going to use 140 because the amount of people has changed, but let's say 140 people. They didn't say how many they released. Did you pick up 200 and then you only kept 140 and that's why Abbott's saying 200? I mean, we don't know. So still, there's a lot of information that hasn't been shared, a lot of secrecy, a lot of deflection, because each of the agencies, again, when you ask them direct questions, they point the finger at somebody else. They don't want to say anything. Another thing I was wondering about, and you may have been wondering about it too, is, for a huge operation like that, and for so many people to get caught up in it, you would think, well, where's all the other cell phone video? Everybody's got a cell phone with them. Why wasn't there cell phone footage or something more from that night or that early morning? And an interesting thing in the search warrant that gives them permission, these agents, the DPS agent and this task force, one of the things it gives them permission to do is to pick up all the digital devices, basically, in case there's evidence of crime and so forth. But I suspect that maybe what happened is that they took people's cell phones. I don't know that for sure, but it looks like they had permission to take, it says cellular devices, cellular phones. The other interesting thing is that they had staked this place out a few times. And like I said earlier, they had gone and bought drugs, like a small amount of drugs of cocaine from a particular person. So no question, that guy should be arrested, should be charged, and he'll have his day in court. But they used an informant, a confidential informant. And they don't disclose the identity of that person to protect the person's safety. But this person kind of told the government what was going on at this place. Some of the information in the affidavit, again, the request for the search warrant, some of it is pretty specific, but some of it is pretty vague. Again, going back to Tren de Aragua, they say basically that this person says that these folks are Tren de Aragua and that we believe or have reason to believe that they're Tren de Aragua, but they never get into the specifics of why that is. They never get into an explanation about, again, we saw communications here, or even we saw, they've said tattoos in the past, or we saw these specific gang tattoos. They don't say any of that. And so what you have is an agency in ICE that has consistently lied in 2025, that has shown a high level of corruption and violation of people's constitutional rights, and Greg Abbott, who says there's more of this to come. Remember, Greg Abbott is one of the most, if not the most, corrupt governors in the United States of America. Runs a very corrupt state government. And he has said there's more of this to come. And so this informant, they acted on this information. Oftentimes informants do provide valuable information. But in this case, a lot of it looked to be very vague. And so I wanted to give you all this update because we've got a lot of questions, some calls, people really asking about what went on, what happened. Again, there's been some great reporting on it, but at the same time, there's still gaps, I think, in the understanding about what happened. But it was a DPS-led, a state-led operation that allowed ICE then to go in there and conduct a dragnet and pick up 140 people, including apparently a baby, including, we know, at least 2 other children, a 15 and 16-year-old, who have been in the United States, I think in San Antonio, since they were infants. And now we don't know where they are. And only 2 people out of 140 have been charged with anything. And it's not any charges having to do with gang membership. Maybe we'll see more in the coming days, but again, the Trump administration, the Abbott administration and state government have been defined by secrecy, lack of transparency. And so getting information, it took us real work to go and track down all of this information. But you can see the affidavit and the search warrant for yourself. All right, I just wanted to give you all that update, and we'll see you soon.